You have to look at things with two very different lenses if you want to have a long-term benefit. With the ketogenic protocols, there is a therapeutic use case and there is a performance use case. And although there is overlap in certain places, I really encourage you to look at them differently. And if you're watching this video, you're probably watching it to obtain just the idea of what is a therapeutic ketogenic diet, what is a performance-oriented ketogenic diet, and where do they apply? So I want you to think of it like this. I look at keto as weaponizing it, seeking specific improvements with things. I don't try to look at it as a lifestyle, although it is a lifestyle for many people, and it has been for me in the past. Now it is a tool in the toolbox. When you understand the benefits, then you can have practical use cases to obtain those benefits to seek specific improvement. So what we'll do in this video is we'll cover the therapeutic side and what people look at the ketogenic diet for in that particular arena, and then we'll jump into the performance side so you can use it as a tool in your toolbox. Let's go ahead and jump in. On the therapeutic side, the first thing that people probably look at is the ketogenic diet from a fat loss and a weight loss perspective, which, although seems like it's vanity driven, it very much so is therapeutic because we have clearly an obesity problem, right? Well, there's a couple of things that are the predominant drivers here. For one, we cannot deny the fact that a lot of the foods that you are consuming on a ketogenic diet are more satiating. If you are satiated more, then you will probably eat less and you will probably lose weight. And that's going to make a lot of people happy in the calories in, calories out world because that's a very simple discussion and it absolutely has to be acknowledged. But the other piece of the equation is when you are doing a lower carb ketogenic diet, you have less in the way of lipogenic spikes and anti-lipolytic spikes. Now, what I mean by that is insulin. Insulin is not the enemy. Insulin is absolutely our friend in many situations, but it's also a big problem in today's society because we have so much in the way of refined foods, so much in the way of refined starches and sugars, so many carbohydrates that are concentrated that we're getting these just outlandish insulin spikes, right? Insulin does not immediately make you fat, but insulin in the presence of a caloric surplus can certainly do that, right? Now, insulin does a couple of things that could be detrimental in this case. For one, it is a lipogenic hormone, which means it is going to trigger fat to store. But more importantly for this conversation is it is anti-lipolytic, which means that it stops the fat burning process. So it stops the fat burning signal. So the more frequently that you are spiking insulin, especially while in a surplus, you are attenuating that fat burning signal. So I don't want to go down that rabbit hole too much because where we can start going with the whole therapeutic keto side is when we start looking at metabolic benefits and we start looking at longevity potential benefits. All this stuff could simply be a result of the weight loss. Okay, let's not forget that if someone loses weight, no matter what mechanism they use to lose weight, they will probably have improvements in their quality of life, their longevity. They will have improvements in their metabolic function. They will probably have improvements from an inflammatory level. But there's also independent ways that the ketogenic diet from a therapeutic use case can affect this. Let's look at the metabolic side of things for a second. There was a study that was published in the journal Frontiers of Endocrinology. It was a 2-year-long study. 2 years. Took a look at 349 individuals. They found that their fasting insulin and glucose levels dropped significantly. They had an increase in their overall good cholesterol. They had a decrease in their blood pressure, but it gets better than that. The amount of people that were on glycemic control medications went down significantly. It went from 57.7% to 26.8% over a 2-year period of time. So there are people that are utilizing medications for glycemic control to control their blood glucose. That is a huge dent, and that really, really speaks volumes to the effect of reducing the refined carbohydrates that are coming into our diets, right? Coming into our bodies through our diet. So again, therapeutic use case. Does that have to do with performance? Sure, in some wraparound ways it does, but it's a therapeutic use case. Then we look at longevity for a second, and I'm very careful to talk about the longevity piece because longevity does not mean living longer. Longevity ultimately means improving your quality of life, okay? Now, with this, we could make arguments with histone deacetylase inhibition and gene expression and all this, but it needs more fleshing out, and there's a lot of things that can trigger histone deacetylase inhibition, so I don't want to just lean on keto with that. But one thing that we can say by looking at the research is more available NAD. So when the ketogenic diet is in place, you have less in the way of glucose. That means that you have more what is called NAD, which normally takes electrons to ultimately create a gradient to create energy via the electron transport chain, all this gobbledygook. It means that you have more NAD available to activate what are called sirtuins, which Dr. David Sinclair's research is pretty interesting, looking at sirtuins and overall longevity genes, right? Putting that aside, the ketogenic diet is actually a stressor. It is a stressor. It stresses the body. And when you stress the body to a certain degree in a positive way, you create an antioxidant response in the body. That's why it's interesting the ketogenic diet seems to increase what is called FOXO3, which is known as the longevity gene because it plays such a critical role in upregulating your body's own antioxidant pathways. So basically, by inducing stress via a ketogenic protocol, you potentially upregulate your body's antioxidant processes, which may or may not have an effect when it comes down to quality of life, health span, longevity. Again, I'm careful to talk there. From the inflammation side of things, there is quite a bit of documented evidence that demonstrates that beta-hydroxybutyrate, the main ketone, inhibits what is called the NLRP3 inflammasome, which goes around and essentially deals with pathogens and kind of modulates an inflammation response within the body. Well, when you look at the journal scientific reports, there seems to be a direct effect on neuroinflammation. And this is a big piece, right? So especially from a therapeutic use case. When you look at this, it's interesting because there is a decrease in tumor necrosis factor 1 alpha levels and also interleukin 1 levels in the hippocampal region of the brain, suggesting that there is a reduction in neuroinflammation, probably due to the inhibition of the NLRP3 inflammasome brought by beta-hydroxybutyrate, by the main ketone body. Now I want to jump over to, again, what I talked about, weaponizing keto from a performance side of things. So everything I'm going to talk about here from a performance side of things, these studies have all been 3 months or less, because what I want to suggest here is that you do not need a longer term ketogenic protocol to obtain the performance benefit. The benefit from keto comes from the reactive oxygen species kind of increase. So you increase the stress in the body, so the body gets better. It gets better, it helps you clear lactate. So we're going to get to all this. These are things that you can achieve in shorter amounts of time. And I encourage you, if you're looking at keto from a performance side of things, to again, put a different set of glasses on and look at it as, this is a stressor. This is a way that I am changing my body and changing how my body sees fuel so that it gets better. Now, no matter what, protein is going to be the most important thing. I know with a therapeutic use case, people think higher fat, lower protein, and I understand that because you're trying to drive ketones high. But when it comes down to performance and even overall metabolic health and longevity, protein is key still. I would rather you increase protein levels and keep fat a little bit lower than vice versa, because I think protein is going to be what ultimately spares the muscle and what ultimately signals for you to retain that muscle, in which case I really consider it life. Whenever possible, go with whole foods, go with meats, go with fish, go with even plant-based whole foods if you can, just to get protein in. Try to limit the protein shakes so you're really going more from those whole food forms. I put a link down below for a company called ButcherBox. They're a sponsor on this channel. If you want to try some really good quality grass-fed, grass-finished meat, like some ribeyes, some New York steaks, some fillets, they've got flank steaks, they've got all kinds of stuff. That link is down below. It gets delivered right to your doorstep, and they've really built their name on having good quality grass-fed and grass-finished beef. But then as they've grown, now they have chicken, so they have chicken wings. They have also fish options like cod. They have sockeye salmon. That's the really deep red sockeye salmon that you want that has that astaxanthin in it. So anyway, like if you're doing keto, I highly recommend ButcherBox because it just makes life easy. That way it just gets shipped to your doorstep, put it in the freezer, you forget about it. It's easy said, one and done, that's it. So that link is down below so you can check out ButcherBox. Again, highly, highly recommend it if you're doing keto. So this first study I want to talk about from from a performance standpoint has to do with the training adaptation. Now, this study is super interesting because it took a look at trained athletes, people that were already trained athletes, and it put them into a ketogenic group or a standard Western group. For 12 weeks, they had them do the exact same style of training. So both groups did endurance work, they did strength work, like sprinting, and then they did HIIT work, like high intensity interval training work. Okay, the results were very interesting. The keto group ended up having a 4.5% increase in body fat loss. Okay, so they ended up accelerating their fat loss process more than the other group. They were eating the same amount of calories, same thing, same exact activity, but they were increasing their body fat loss. That's interesting enough, but what about performance? They had an increase in their 6-second sprint power as well, which goes against the grain from what people would normally think. That's sprinting. Why would that seems like very carb burning? Well, they still had an improvement there, but there's also a significant increase in critical power. So meaning like really concentrated power, like with sprinting or high intensity interval training. So what's going on here? What's the mechanism? Well, it's interesting. There's a number of things you can look at. For one, maybe they lost weight and they perform better, right? They lost weight, they're better sprinters. That's something to definitely look at. There's also more fatty acid utilization. So they've noticed like throughout all of these activities, even the endurance activity, there's just more fatty acid utilization. So maybe there's more energy on hand for them compared to carbohydrates. Maybe that's what it comes down to. But additionally, some of the researchers have hypothesized that because of the increase in omega-3s that naturally end up coming in just by the higher fat content nature of a ketogenic diet, that leads to more cell fluidity, membrane fluidity, okay? That means that maybe the red blood cell has a little bit less deformability, okay? That means it doesn't deform as much, it has more potential to carry oxygen. Now, this is purely a hypothesis, but it does make sense. More omega-3s, more cell fluidity, that means that the membrane is able to do its job better. So a red blood cell might be able to deliver more oxygen. So one potential theory there. Again, we're looking at a shorter term use case for how you might be able to improve some things. But then we look at a study that was published in the journal Nutrients. One of my favorite studies that's relatively new. It is a rodent model study, so we have to take that, with consideration there. But this is looking at recovery. And they found that when they put mice on either a higher carb chow diet or a ketogenic chow diet, the mice that were on the ketogenic chow diet were able to handle exercise to exhaustion and recover from it much better. It accelerated their recovery. And they found that they had lower levels of lactate. Okay, lactate is the byproduct of exercise. You create lactate. Higher levels of blood lactate indicate fatigue generally. Well, if you have lower levels of lactate, that means that your body is able to clear it faster. If you have the ability to clear lactate faster, it suggests that your body is more efficient at the long-term game, which means that rather than lactate just accumulating, lactate is actually taken and used as a fuel. It is cleared out of the system. It's used as a fuel. It's called, lactate clearance, but it also goes through what's called the Cori cycle. So this was very interesting, although done in rodents, but they also saw that there was a significantly lower level of creatine kinase in the ketogenic mice. Creatine kinase is a byproduct of muscle breakdown. So this was suggesting that there was less actual muscle breaking down, which if accurate and applied to humans could mean that there is less delayed onset muscle soreness. This could be very fascinating stuff. So again, shorter term use case demonstrating that, hey, there is a therapeutic benefit. But then we look at kind of the strength piece, and people that are power athletes are going to say, no, like keto's not going to work. I need lots of carbs. I need lots of carbs. Doesn't necessarily apply if you're focusing on like your 1 or 2 repetition max, because it doesn't really use that pathway anyway. You're utilizing the creatine phosphate pathway. Anyway, don't listen to me. Here's an interesting study. The Journal of Strength and Conditioning took a look at 25 resistance trained men, put them on ketogenic diet or standard Western diet that had higher carbohydrates. Okay, they did this for 10 weeks. During this 10-week period, they found that both groups had the same increases in strength with their 1 repetition max. One group didn't do better than the other. Carb group, keto group, they both had the same increases in their 1 repetition max. The only difference was that the ketogenic group ended up having higher levels of testosterone, probably simply because there were more fats and more cholesterol to ultimately synthesize and create the steroid hormone testosterone. So with that, it kind of really begs the question, is like, well, is keto just as good as carbs? Not necessarily. There's always going to be situations where carbs are better and where keto is better. My point with utilizing a performance-based ketogenic diet is, once again, I'll say this one more really important time, we look at it with a different set of glasses on. Performance keto is all about seeking that specific improvement. And we've talked about it before. Like, I would eat dog poop if it would make me perform better. It's all about what is working and using it as a tool. Whereas a therapeutic use case of keto is like, I am trying to fix an issue. I am trying to mitigate XYZ. I am trying to achieve this. There is overlap with certainty, but which bag you keep it in terms of your tool bag is entirely different. So as always, keep it locked in here on my channel, and I'll see you tomorrow.